With everything going on in the world, people need to be uplifted. They need something that promotes character, creativity, confidence, and joy. The GRN show is not just an average talk show. The topics are powerful and will make you think. Join me on this journey to be informed, to relate, to connect, and to evolve.
Good evening and welcome to the GRN show. Our topic this evening is regarding the quality of sleep and how it impacts our lives. You know, there's been many studies done regarding sleep apnea, regarding insomnia, and how they all really affect our lives. You know, actually, we have found that the Black community is affected. The Black community is impacted the most by sleep apnea. And in the Latinos community, the low quality of sleep, as well as short sleep, they suffer a great deal from that. It could be for many factors. But with us this evening, we have an expert in the field of sleep, and he's conducted many studies as well as published many articles on this subject. So I am so pleased to have with us this evening Dr. Girardin Jean-Louis from the University of Miami. So Dr. Jean-Louis, good morning and good evening and welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
So I'm going to follow your lead, Dr. Kittel. Good morning, good evening, what time of day you are looking at this show. It's a pleasure to be here, Kittel, so thank you for inviting me. Sleep health is really important. We'll talk about this. Let's have a conversation about this because I realize in minoritized community, we don't often talk about this. So it's wonderful we have this opportunity to talk about the kind of work we have done and what folks have to do in terms of improving their health to forestall the onset of cardiovascular disease and to some degree, brain injury of the Alzheimer's type.
So how did you get into the study? I didn't even realize there was a specialty in that. You know, you think of neurologists, you think of other scientists who study the brain. I did not realize that was a specialty. So how did you get involved in that?
A long and a short version of that, but I'll spare the audience. I'll give you the short version. I went to the City College of New York when I was 17, having left Haiti, thinking that I'm going to become an engineer. And of course, City College was then one of the best schools in New York to specialize in engineering, electrical engineering I was interested in. Couple of semesters down, I began to be bored to some degree, and my advisor recommended that I did some electives, have some fun. And when we look at the booklet, the course that was left was a course which we call Sleep, Dreams, and Lab Techniques. So I registered for that. Now, as an engineer, somebody was thinking about engineering, when I saw, in fact, that you can actually record brain activity on a computer or on a machine called a polygraph, I was fascinated by this. So the following semester, I took more courses in neuroscience and psychology, and thereafter I decided, you know what, engineering is great, but I think my passion is really about neuroscience. And then I changed my major. Of course, I had to go to tell my parents that I had changed my major. So my parents, not knowing much about neuroscience and psychology, thought maybe there was something wrong with my mind, be examined. So yeah, so that's how my journey started. Contrast that with some of my colleagues for whom sleep may have been a factor they may have experienced in terms of their parents not sleeping well, their neighbors not sleeping well. But for me, it was really a fortuitous turn. Just a course in sleep and dreams actually put me on the path towards sleep disordered medicine. And lo and behold, so many years later, I'm now leading a program at the University of Miami, thinking about how do we help improve sleep at the level of minoritized communities so that they too can enjoy the fruit of the advances in science.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you know, you fell into your purpose. Obviously, you've done very well. I've read many of your articles, and it's just wonderful to know that that expertise is there. Now, what happens if a person does not get enough sleep, and what are the cumulative effects?
This is a wonderful question. I get that all the time when I go to barbershop, the churches, beauty salons, food pantries talking about sleep health. Sleep is really important. It's important so much so that both vertebrate and invertebrate species, in fact, sleep. So besides us humans, animals also sleep. So there are species of birds that can sleep while in flight with one half of the brain asleep, the other half awake. Marine animals, dolphins, they do the same thing. Half of the brain is asleep, half of the brain awake, so they could continue to swim. So it's really a necessity. If we stop sleeping, or if we deprive ourselves of sleep for a number of weeks, eventually we can actually die. So we can't do studies on that because it's unethical to do that. But studies that have been done in New Orleans to find if you continue to deprive them of sleep, eventually they die. So sleep is really important. Unfortunately, we are carrying a sleep debt in America and other parts in the world, such that we're not sleeping the recommended amount, which is 7 to 8 hours. So the work that was done about 40 years ago at UC San Diego by my mentor, Dan Kripke, showed there's really a curvilinear relationship between how much sleep you get and survival, mortality, if you will, and different types of comorbidity, psychiatric as well as medical. So the relationship is such that anybody who sleeps about 6 hours or less, or 8 hours or more, are at greater risk for survival, for early survival, for actually early mortality, I should say, and medical and psychiatric comorbidity. So if you were to ask me, how much sleep should you get? I would say go with the Academy's recommendation, 7 to 8 hours. Now, these are epi data. It doesn't really mean if you happen to be sleeping 6 or less, your risk of death are substantially higher. There are people that are naturally short sleepers, in which case, fine. But if you happen to be sleeping 5, 6 hours and you're realizing you can't function properly during the day, you fall asleep at the wheel, you fall asleep doing your work hours, there is a problem that has to be checked out by a sleep specialist.
Let me ask you the reverse, obviously the lack of sleep. And what I'm noticing, especially in older adults, they're sleeping. There are times, where my mom may be with me and she is sleeping. By 11 o'clock in the morning, she's not up. So I go check. How does that impact one's life? Is it good to sleep a lot, or is it bad to sleep a lot?
There are so many factors that influence the amount of sleep we get. Some of them are psychosocial, others are environmental. But you point out a very important issue here. That is, as we get older, do we sleep less, or do we not have the capacity to sleep? We published a paper about a few months ago that demonstrated that when we get older, we don't necessarily sleep less. And in fact, some people sleep more. If you consider the full 24-hour period, not just sleep at night, you'd find that older folks would do not necessarily have a medical problem or psychiatric problem, sleeping a little bit longer than we are, or they're not sleeping less. What tends to happen is that there's a particular organ in our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That's the organ that actually controls what we call melatonin. You heard about if you're not sleeping well, take exogenous melatonin, it would have. It's true, it does it, but we have to talk about this. Since the brain cannot control secretion of melatonin the way it used to, you might be not sleeping enough at night, but you are sleeping early morning hours as well as late evening hours. So sleep becomes to some degree fragmented as you get older. Not for all people, but for some people. But when you get into the 80s, especially if you have Alzheimer's dementia, the suprachiasmatic nucleus gets even more disorganized. Therefore, the sleep cycle also becomes more disorganized. So yes, my grandpa, if they go to a party, it's 8 p.m., you find that they're falling asleep. And sometimes also, early morning hours, they also fall asleep after they had a cup of coffee. So
yes.
in some ways, it's really okay, it's normal. We just have to find ways to integrate the change of their lifespan into their daily routine so that they feel they are still having a very good life. It's fine, because that's just the way our body is constructed.
Got it. It's like that clock,
Yes.
it really controls our sleeps and all. But, I've mentioned that studies showed that African Americans, or the Black community, suffers the most from sleep apnea. If one is diagnosed with sleep apnea, what can they do?
We kind of have a double whammy when it comes to Black or Latino, in the sense that we were talking about short sleep before. If you're comparing Blacks white with Black with white, you find that Blacks and brown are sleeping about 30 minutes, 45 minutes less. So that's a significant problem. So if you compound this with this difficulty breathing at night, which is called sleep disordered breathing or sleep apnea, their situation is even worse. This is why we believe in part sleep disordered breathing may be a significant component of the increased likelihood of having a stroke or heart attack during the night. So sleep apnea is a problem essentially where folks go to bed at night and they are unable to breathe properly, which causes them to awake, because if they do not breathe, of course, you know what's going to happen. Lack of oxygen to the brain can actually cause significant damage to the brain, if not, in fact, heart attack or stroke or eventually death. So unfortunately for Black and brown folks, we have a higher prevalence of sleep disordered breathing, which unfortunately remain undiagnosed mostly. About 90% of folks with sleep disordered breathing are not even screened, are not diagnosed, therefore are not treated. So part of the work that we are doing ourselves is to be able to share the information about sleep health with members of our community so that they become aware that sleep apnea is a significant problem. It has to be diagnosed, it has to be treated in order to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, if you will.
So what sort of treatment? Let's say the doctor says, okay, you have sleep apnea. And they say, well, one of the ways to ameliorate it is to do this. What would that this be? Is it surgery? Is it prescription drugs?
So primarily now I'm focused on research, but some years ago, I was leading a clinic in Brooklyn where we're trying to help folks with sleep apnea alleviate the burden of sleep-related cardiovascular disease. So the treatment of choice now is a device which you call PAP. PAP is usually positive airway pressure. So since you can breathe at night, we put a mask on your nose and mouth that makes it easier for you to breathe. So therefore, you don't have to wake up that many times. It works beautifully well, but unfortunately, not too many people use that. The contract I would have with my patient is you could either wear the machine for the rest of your days, or you can in fact lose weight. Why do we say that? About 75% to 80% of people that are overweight or obese do in fact have sleep apnea. So if you lose weight, your ability to breathe at night is much better. So therefore, if you were to exercise or just increase your physical activity profile, you'll realize you're not having as much difficulty breathing at night. If the severity of sleep apnea goes down, you don't have to wear the mask again. So the whole idea of titration, meaning if you were to be given a pressure of 25, that is how do you keep the upper airway open, and you're losing weight every 6 months, we monitor you. If you go down at a pressure of 4 or less, it simply means you are okay. So that's the contract. Really, you could use PAP on a regular basis, but if you don't like PAP, the ultimate treatment is to lose weight, which is not easy, but there are regimens one can follow to lose weight.
That is hopeful. That is hopeful. I thought there was no treatment at all. But we're going to take a short break and we will be right back.
Yeah, we don't want the patient to ignore that daily feeling of being too tired to make it through the day, or having trouble getting out of bed because they feel like they've had a poor night. One is supposed to bounce out of bed after a good night's sleep. That untreated sleep disorders are associated with shortening of our lives. Certainly in the case of the untreated sleep apneas, difficulties with premature stroke, heart attack, lung disease, and high blood pressure, as well as aggravation of other systemic conditions such as diabetes occur. Sleep disorders can have many and varied symptoms. Certainly one of the most common would be fatigue during the day, a feeling of unrefreshing sleep, or there can be more complex sleep disorders which are expressed by certain behaviors at night, including snoring, loud gasping, sonorous respirations, choking, or behaviors which are even more unusual, getting up in the middle of the night, walking, talking, and other such similar behaviors. Those particular symptoms can be examined in the sleep laboratory after a good sleep history, perhaps by a sleep medicine physician if your physician so deems it necessary. The Summa Hospital Systems have a group of sleep laboratories that are unique in that the staff are board certified and trained. The allied medical personnel have an ongoing training program which includes certification. The surroundings are appointed to be best suited for the patient being comfortable and safe during the course of the night. And all of our equipment is really the most up-to-date technologically that's available. If you think you may have a sleep disorder and wish to see a Summa sleep medicine specialist, please call or visit us on the web.
So we are back with Dr. Jean-Louis, and we're talking about a topic that really affects our lives tremendously. So, Dr. Jean-Louis, as we were talking about sleep deprivation and how it affects our health, what are some of the chronic health I think you've touched on them a little bit, but maybe we can reinforce it for our audience here. What are the type of chronic illnesses that may surface due to regular, lack of sleep and so forth, insomnia, sleep apnea?
Let's pick up on sleep apnea because it's the condition that is most often encountered. Insomnia is important too, but we could talk about this perhaps later. For sleep disordered breathing, which is a condition that's really causing a lot of medical and psychiatric harm, if in fact you have sleep disordered breathing that's not treated, what it entails is you fall asleep. It could take you about 5 minutes to fall asleep, which is not healthy. Healthy is 15 to 20 minutes. Less than that meaning you're chronically sleep deprived. Even if you didn't have sleep apnea, if it's taking you 5 minutes to fall asleep, you know there's a problem. You are just walking around being extremely sleepy during the day, which will affect your daytime performance. There's no question about that. Okay, in terms of sleep disordered breathing, when you fall asleep, you enter stage 1. Light sleep, if I call your name, you might still be able to respond. Then you get into stage 2, which is getting a little deeper. What happens is when somebody has sleep apnea, they get to stage 2, but they don't often get to stage 3, 4, which we call delta sleep. Mm-hmm. Delta sleep is very important. It's deep sleep. If you ever have any types of physical injury, when the doctor says you have to sleep a little bit more, they are really referring to delta sleep, deep sleep. But because you keep waking up out of stage 2, you never quite get to the delta stage. Now, during delta sleep, if you will, that's when we have what we call blood pressure dipping, which means the level of blood pressure you have during the day should go down. For a lot of Black and brown folks who don't get into the delta sleep, the blood pressure never quite dipped. They call it nocturnal hypertension. So for those people, you'll realize it's very difficult to manage their blood pressure. Sometimes doctors who may not be familiar with what's happening at night keeps changing the medication, it's still not working. They might even think the patient is not being adherent. In fact, what should be thinking about is what's happening at night. Are they really getting a good night's sleep? So if they are not, that's a problem. We're also learning, Gitel, that right now, if you don't get enough delta sleep, some of the toxins in the brain, which we call A, beta, and tau, that are indices of Alzheimer's dementia, don't get flushed out. They are only flushed out during delta sleep or slow wave sleep. So if you happen to be Black or African American or Latinx folks, if you don't get enough delta sleep, your risk of Alzheimer's dementia is substantially higher. In fact, 3 to 4. Wow. Comparing that to white, it's about 3 to 1. So slow wave sleep, important for high blood pressure. Slow wave sleep also important to reduce the likelihood you might develop Alzheimer's dementia. That's just high blood pressure. The same is true for diabetes, same is true for high cholesterol level. Also, the same is true for obesity. If you happen to be a short sleeper, if you happen to be somebody who has obstructive sleep apnea, your risk of obesity is substantially higher. Now, I have to say, there's a bi-directional relationship. It seems as if obesity brings about sleep-disordered breathing or sleep apnea, And once you have sleep apnea, it compounds the problem. You get even more overweight or obese.
And then on top of it, you may have diabetes, you may have hypertension. So really it is those ingredients, the lack of sleep definitely has a major impact. Now, Dr. Jean, go ahead, please.
I would also explain that we learned about 10 years ago that if you happen to be a short sleeper, there are two very specific hormones, leptin and ghrelin, that become disorganized. Those substances or hormones are responsible for appetite and weight gain. So if they're not properly controlled because of lack of sleep, it's almost impossible to lose weight. So you might find a lot of people that go to the gym regularly, and it's very difficult to lose weight. In fact, what they really want to do is increase their sleep time so that they can control those hormones, we can then control appetite and weight gain.
Super, super. Now, I really, I thought this was an interesting topic to really talk about, not only because it impacts us, but the wonderful work that you've done in New York and now that we are doing in with the University of Miami. Can you please tell us a little bit what you are doing, why you're doing it, and how can my viewers help?
We learned early on that the type of work we really wanted to do was really in the lab. We wanted to have folks come to our lab to be studied, to be diagnosed and be treated. Then we began to realize that those people don't necessarily come to the lab for a number of reasons. The laboratory is a strange environment in which you're going to be spending a night away from your family, from your bed partner. In some communities, this is not well regarded. So we have all kinds of cancellations, a whole bunch of reasons why people don't want to do that. So therefore, you realize if you really want to study their sleep, you got to go to their home, the place that they control, a place that they consider to be a safe place. So our work has shifted from being a lab-based operation to a environmental-based or home-based. So now, in terms of what we are doing, both in New York, what we used to do, and what we're doing in Florida, we go to the patient's home to do sleep recording to get a better sense in terms of what are some of the environmental factors that influence their sleep in a negative way. We're learning now that noise exposure, air quality, constant fluctuation of temperature in the bedroom, noise from the environment, all of those things compound already difficult situation where they can't sleep. Also psychosocial factors, racial discrimination or perceived racial discrimination, the type of neighborhood they happen to be, if they have lack of green space, all of those factors influence the sleep in a negative way. So what we begin to think about is, let's find out about all what those factors are, and then what policies can be derived from those so that the environmental factors that make it difficult to get a good night's sleep can therefore be changed. And that's what we're beginning to do now. We started in New York, we have a cohort in New York we're still following, but also we're building a new cohort in Miami. So ultimately, we want to be able to look at the cohort in New York and Miami and see how do the environmental factors in New York and Miami differ such that it influences the sleep differentially.
Interesting. You know, I can't wait to see the results of the study because there are other factors, of course. I remember when I used to live in New York with the colds, there were times, you know, that impacted my sleep, or even the summer. But here, the environment is a little more different. It'll be quite interesting to see the outcome. If somebody wants to participate in the study, and we're targeting basically Miami-Dade residents, how do they contact you, Dr. Jean-Louis?
Fantastic question. So then we have set up a number of ways folks can contact. We have Twitter handle, we have Facebook handle, which we can provide. But for now, perhaps the easiest way is to call our center manager, Crystal Vidal. Her number is 305-243-1301. Again, 305-243-1301. Or if you prefer, you can contact us at our email address, which is tscs@miami.edu, tscs@miami.edu.
Excellent. I cannot thank you enough, Dr. Jean-Louis, for the wonderful information you've given us. And certainly I am sure, you know, we'll get a couple of people to participate, and it's all about making a difference in our health, making a difference in our lives.
Certainly, none of that work is really possible without the engagement of folks from the community. So what we're doing yourself is we're supposed to be the academicians we'll partner with folks in the community, such as Gitel herself, who is the chair of our community steering committee. We're talking about folks who are from barbershop, beauty salons, and different type of CBOs are represented. So it's really a partnership to make sure that we have adequate access, and then what the type of questions that we are asking, in fact, are relevant and will make a difference in people's lives. And that's why we go to the community all the time, because this is where folks are. So the laboratory work is good, but the engagement in the community to me is more pleasurable, more rewarding, especially when you realize you're touching people's lives. And there are places when I go a second and third time, folks will come to me and say, you know what, the tips you gave me about how to sleep better has really changed my life. I'm happier now. I have to spend with my kids. My husband is happier. I thought there was something wrong with the marriage. I wanted to walk away. I'm being very serious about this. In fact, all they really had to do is get a good night's sleep. Irritability goes down, the mood is much higher, they want to spend time with each other. So sleep is really important for both physical health as well as mental health. So folks, get a good night's sleep. 7 hours is what we recommend.
Awesome. Thanks again, and we'll be in touch. Thanks for all that you do. Really appreciate it, Dr. Don't we? Have a good evening.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dorothy's Coaching Corner. Today's topic, we're going to talk about rest for your health. When it comes to being healthy, sleep and rest is among one of the most important and re-energizing for the next day or in whatever we do. Deprivation of sleep, as we all know, can cause many problems health-wise and functioning properly. Whether it's energy we need for work, exercise, studying, or even to deal with the little ones in our homes, we need to rest our bodies and organs. Today, as we all know, many people in our community suffer with sleep deprivation. Aiming to continue in living a healthy life and lifestyle is something we all should continue to learn more about and focused on today. Well, here's some great tips if you find sleeping is a problem for you, or to have a healthy sleep habit for better health. First and foremost, try to get to sleep at the same time and get at least 6 to 8 hours of rest. With our bodies having a natural biological clock that identifies the times we mostly sleep and wake up, sometimes we have to help our system to get into that calm state to get to sleep. By doing something comfortable to us in getting to that calm state helps us to get to sleep faster, whether it's closing the lights in a quiet place or drinking calming tea an hour before you sleep. Practicing these habits with sleep problems definitely helps. Secondly, if sleeping problem becomes a habit, find healthy sleep aids. Drinking that calming tea, taking a soothing bath, massages, or taking natural melatonin 2 hours or an hour ahead can help to calm your system before preparing to sleep. And remember, lavender and chamomile are among that list. And finally, if the problem persists, finding information on being part of sleep study is a great idea. With this problem becoming more prevalent in the minority community, it's important to find out why and how to research programs that are studies in knowing the root cause of sleep deprivation. So with these important tips on sleeping deprivation, let's all aim at rest for your health and finding solutions on getting our beauty rest.
Coach Dorothy is always on point. But as you've heard, sleep is essential as food and water. There are myriads of issues that are caused by poor sleep, and consistently getting less than the recommended 7 hours of sleep or more can lead to serious health problems. We urge you to not ignore them. If you find you're not sleeping well, make sure you talk to your physician. Make sure you do something about it. Find the cause. Practice mindfulness. There are times it is just stress. And if that does not work, definitely let your physician know. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. Good night and enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening. Good night.